Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the launch of Gold Light Shining, the debut collection of poetry from Bebe Ashley. This evening, to celebrate Gold Light Shining's publication, we're thrilled to present Bebe in conversation with award-winning poet Stephen Sexton. My name is Laura Cassidy, and along with Claire Hennessy and Emer Ryan, I am one of the co-founders at Bebe's publisher, Banshee Press. Bebe Ashley lives in Belfast and is an AHRC-funded PhD candidate at the Seamus Heaney Centre for Poetry. Her work can be found in publications such as Poetry Ireland Review, Poetry Jukebox and The Tangerine. When procrastinating from her PhD, she takes British Sign Language and Braille classes and writes pop culture articles for United by Pop, specialising in Harry Styles. At Banshee Press, we publish a literary journal and a select list of books, and we are honoured to have Gold Light Shining as our latest title and first poetry collection. Gold Light Shining is a stunning debut, exploring, among other things, pop music, celebrity, fandom, and the internet. We published Bebe's poems in issue 9 of the journal and were immediately taken with their bubbly, ironic energy and knowing engagement with the merchandise and paraphernalia of pop culture. In a style reminiscent of Frank O'Hara, there is a worldly knowingness to Bebe's poems, and yet never at the expense of their signature joyousness, a joy in the cultural disarray. Fittingly, we first came to hear of Gold Light Shining via the internet. I remember seeing Bebe's statement that she had a collection of Harry Styles poems ready to be published, and I remember being impressed with her confidence and positivity, characteristics which are integral to her poetry and to her work ethic. When we first read the collection, we were blown away by Bebe's homage to a world-famous icon, dotted with local references, and elevating the personal experience of fandom. It has been an absolute pleasure to work with Bebe on Gold Light Shining, and we were fortunate to have the expertise of the brilliant Jessica Traynor, who worked with Bebe editorially on this wonderful book. We are so excited to celebrate Bebe's tremendous achievement this evening with her family, friends and readers, and to share Gold Light Shining with the world. The book is available to buy via our website, bansheelit.com. We'll pop a link in the chat box, and via all good bookshops in Ireland, thanks to the teams at Gill and Brookside Publishing Services. We're also offering free shipping to all launch attendees. Just use the offer code BB at checkout. Gold Light Shining began as a Harry Styles collection and expanded to more generally examine community, obsession, and coming of age. We are so looking forward to hearing Bebe discuss her work, its inspirations and origins with Stephen this evening. Stephen Sexton's first book, If All the World and Love Were Young, was the winner of the Forward Prize for First Collection in 2019 and the Shine Strong Award for Best First Collection. He is a recipient of the E.M. Forster Award, an Eric Gregory Award, and winner of the National Poetry Competition. He teaches at the Seamus Heaney Centre for Poetry at Queen's University, Belfast. I will now hand you over to Stephen.
Laura, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here to speak with Bebe, to be a part of this evening. It is a joy. So it is entirely everyone else. It is a pleasure to welcome you here to the launch. Here I say, where you are, to the launch of Gold Light Shining, a collection of poems by Bebe Ashley. And while we're here to celebrate the marvelous achievement of Gold Light Shining, we're also celebrating the first poetry publication by Banshee Press, something which will be celebrated by poets and readers of poems across Ireland and indeed across the world. That a press peopled with such impressive, generous and committed editors will now be involved in sharing poetry a notoriously profitable enterprise, is a cause for the good Aldi Prosecco you've been keeping in the cupboard, or even something better than that if it exists. This is the special occasion you've been waiting for, so please have it. This isn't, I don't have any, but you know, to Banshee Press's first poetry collection. This evening, in celebrating the achievement of this book, Bebe will read a selection of poems, and I'll have the joy of having a conversation about its composition and its themes. We hope those of you watching from home will have some questions and thoughts too, and you'll have an opportunity to pose them towards the end of our event this evening. John Montague, and I guess we'd wonder what he might make of a book of poems about Harry Styles, but John Montague said that the ultimate function of the poet is to praise. It may have taken somebody like Dante the long pilgrimage through the Inferno and Purgatorio to get up to the praising point, but nevertheless, that is the end vision. Gold Light Shining is, among other things, a work of praise. And I notice among the many words of endorsement from Doireann Ní Ghríofa, Claire Askew, David Combs, myself, similar phrases or thoughts occurring. Words like dazzling, intensity, fandom, lush, dizzying. And if I may quote myself for a moment, I called it a kaleidoscopic book, full of its own light, its prisms, its beautiful forms. Gold Light Shining feels like this. One luminous image morphs into another. Themes multiply and swell and recede. But it is, however, the music and the person of Harry Styles which constitutes a focal point. And it's Harry the book seems to be addressed to. I quote, "Harry, I'm not saying I understand how it feels, I'm just trying to say I see you." The book is, as this epigraph suggests, intensely visual. And while the book concerns Harry, it reflects on celebrity and celebrity culture more deeply. It asks who is being looked at or scrutinized, who is made an object of this kind of success and the intense focus of the camera. And in this ultimately very tender book, the gazer looks so long at Harry Styles, they eventually come to see themselves in him, I think. And as Padraig Regan says, the apparent content of these poems, that is the life and work of Harry Styles, is not included for its own novelty. Rather, these poems, by meditating on Styles, become a series of thoughtful, tender, and insightful vignettes about celebrity, fashion, glamour, belonging, sexuality, and youth. The book is both exactly concerned with Harry Styles and, by a twist of the kaleidoscope, if you will, about the self refracted in his image. This is a book distinctly of our times, a sign of our times, if you will, and especially now as we interact more than ever through images of each other. We wish we could be there together, but we have images of each other for now. In an article for The Honest Ulsterman, Bebe says, "In these poems, I'm not pretending to know a man I've never met. This is one reason why Harry is never referred to as Harry in any of the poems. This is, as the book tells us, a work of surfaces and images, hints and fragments. Across its 4 sections, Gold Light Shining does seem to pose that most romantic of questions. Who am I in the light of you?" And the I of these poems is capacious. We should always be skeptical of who I is in a poem, but here the self, in its gazing at Harry, comes to undergo the same kind of fracturing. Even the poems about the Norwegian TV series Skam, or is it Skam? I'm not sure, are somehow about Harry Styles, thanks to the microscopic eye for detail of the superfan. I'm quoting again, the Harry Styles song from the Dining Table plays in season 1, episode 10 of Druck, the German remake of Skam. This is from the notes section at the back of the book. And it's this impulse to connect things that are, let's face it, not necessarily connected, that is part of this whole project. And more than the eye for detail and for humor, because it's a funny book, Gold Light Shining and Bebe's work in general is testament to the thrill and agility of imagination. As much as this book is about a celebrity, Harry is to this book what the disco ball is to the disco. We're here for the floral suits and pink sequin Chelsea boots, to have the time of our lives, to quote the first poem that Bebe is in fact wearing a jumper demonstrating. But now and again, when we look at this book, we see 1,000 versions of ourselves coming back out of it. That's its real strength for me. I think that's what the I in this book does with Harry. It's what we do with this book. So I was going to say without further chit chat, but in fact, there's going to be much more chit chat. But for now, I would like to invite Bebe to speak to us and to read a couple of poems.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here today. And thank you to Laura and Stephen for those really excellent introductions. I will try to have some more intelligent thoughts on those introductions over the next kind of hour or so, but I thought I would start just with a quick reading that really contextualizes, I think, the collection. Here it is, if you haven't seen it yet. Really contextualizes the collection and sets the scene. So I'm actually going to start with the epigraph. Everyone in that room is on the same page and everyone knows what I stand for. I'm not saying I understand how it feels. I'm just trying to say, I see you. Harry Styles. Harry, I'm not saying I understand how it feels. I'm just trying to say, I see you. Kiwi, kiwi, kiwi. The boy with the Gucci guitar strings is playing glam rock to a room of strangers. His photographer captures a group of girls in knockoff floral suits and pink sequin Chelsea boots. Heart thumping, heavy jumping, his final song shakes the sweat-slick stage on the concrete floor. The guitarist who used to work in the pizza shop looks to the bassist, the keys, the drummer, to know if this is normal. It is not normal. People are having the time of their lives. Never going back now. Nobody knew I would spend the next year writing about flares with flora and fauna print. I think most about the yellow silk trousers, their shelves of potted plants climbing the inseam. Nearly always a continent away, I wait in the wrong time zone for lights up, for pixels of dry ice and smoke to clear in the poor connection of the periscope. It wasn't until the embellishments of Basel that I started preparing for next year's silhouette. With a travel scholarship with beauty papers, I elaborate on a Peter Pan collar and pearls. So those first few poems are in the section fandom and are very much what I would count as Harry Styles poems. He's on the stage, I'm in the room at the concert with him, and so is everybody else. So those are the first few poems in the section fandom. Pretty Woman. Before the wind blows you away, I want you to know I haven't slept in 4 nights. But in the attic, I watched 3,000 tiny white lights ebb and swell. Behind the patterns of the marble tub, let's strip to bubblegum silk. Champagne is burning a hole in the pocket of your dressing gown. Ever since New York. I've kept my head down, darling. Started swimming early enough that the night porter waves me in. Waves me out so that the freezing fog will crystallize loose strands of hair falling from my half up, half down elastic. The insomniac at the bagel stand salutes me. Green tea, gravlax, cream cheese topped with a few drops of lemon. There are flashing lights already and the bookshop is slow to open. I pretend to know everything while I wait. On Church Avenue, I light candles, like the way the flame burns for the quickest moment under my thumb. Thank you.
I'm going to start well, I don't think it's a provocative question, but let's say it is. So Gold Light Shining is a book about Harry Styles. Is this too simplistic?
I mean, when I've been explaining to people over the last 2 years what I've been working on, 99% of the time I have said, oh, it's a book about Harry Styles. But obviously under the surface, it's so much more than that. I think you don't need to know his music. You don't need to really know who he is or what he wore, in Amsterdam 2018 on the tour to enjoy this book. I think he's used very much as a prism, and kind of the gold light shining throughout the book is Harry. So he's there, but no, it's not just the book about Harry Styles.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting thing. I mean, when we take any kind of icon, I guess, like this, the way that I think the book encourages us to read it is to say, well, it appears to be about him, but yeah, it's not. It's what we see through him that's this, is what the book is about. And yeah, I'm really very glad to hear you say that. So I have a rough idea of this, because you and I know this, but everybody else probably doesn't know this. But this project started quite a while ago, a couple of years ago. And in fact, I remember the very first poem of this project that was, I think, made out of, it was a found poem, right? It was made of various things that Harry Styles said that you pieced together into, yeah, I think a kind of love poem, right? But wherever that love was going was kind of misdirected. But for everyone else, I mean, how did this project start? You've spoken a little bit about it, I think, in the Honest Ulsterman, in that article. But yeah, how did this project start?
So yeah, it did start probably about 2.5, maybe, well, I suppose 3 years ago now, when I first moved to Belfast, and I had freshers flu. So I was in bed for a weekend and ended up on YouTube kind of watching like X Factor car crash auditions. And, you know, the more videos I watched, like the algorithm kind of builds and builds. And I started seeing videos of One Direction and them on the X Factor, and then kind of them in interviews. And I was really interested in the kind of cadence of Harry Styles' voice, and his vocabulary really stood out to me. It was particularly interesting. So I grabbed my notebook and started writing down a couple of things he said, and kind of, 6 hours in after that, I thought, oh, this could be a really fun poem. So I pulled it together into a poem, titled it Harry in speech marks. And that kind of became the first Harry Styles poem that I wrote. It didn't make it into the book because it wasn't good enough, but I think it was a great kind of leaping off point that allowed me to kind of learn more about who this person was and their kind of interaction with language itself. He was very dependent on how the media presented him at that time. And that was something that especially intrigued me. So yeah, I took it to workshop and ended up kind of thinking, this was quite fun, maybe I should do another. And yeah, I remember we had a meeting and I said to you, like, oh yeah, I think I want to write more Harry Styles poems. And you encouraged me to do that. So really this book is as much your fault as it is Harry's.
Well, I'm very pleased that it is. Yeah, and it was a very exciting thing. And I mean, for me, as I suggested in the sort of introductory remarks that I made, is I do think it's about loads of things, and Harry as a person can tell us a surprising amount about everything that isn't Harry Styles. The book seems to look at him, but we learn so much more about the world. And yeah, that sense of celebrity, that sense of surface, and the fact that you're very careful to say that you don't know him, that you're dealing with images of him, you're dealing with the fragments of interviews you see or clips or in the Met Gala, this sort of thing, that you're always dealing with versions of him seems really key to how the world works at the minute. That it's we're not we learn about things, we learn about each other through kind of digital fragments. And so you started kind of delirious, watching videos. What about later on when you were maybe committing to it more seriously? How did you find that motivation to keep going?
So I think another kind of really interesting thing about this is, 2 years ago, I wasn't really aware who Harry Styles was. And now, I'm quite a big fan, tend to talk about him quite a lot, have a lot of Harry Styles t-shirts, a lot of Harry Styles jumpers. And I think in the same way, Harry also, his kind of celebrity has exponentially grown, I would say, over the last 2 years. So we're in very different places than when we started. And I think kind of part of the joy of this book came at kind of realizing that. And the more experiences I had, kind of getting a travel scholarship to go to New York to look at the Met Gala exhibition, that was because he hosted the Met Gala. And there were kind of all these tangents that started appearing throughout my life that I kind of wanted to go along with and see where it would take me. So I never set out to write a book of Harry Styles poems, and I'm still kind of amazed that it does exist out in the world, and the form that it's taken in the end is so different to what I would have thought it would have started as. When I initially started, it was very much kind of using song titles as poem titles and a bit more kind of obvious references. Whereas by the end, I really wanted to see how many I could sneak in and what kind of hidden kind of facts or hidden references I could put in there and still claim that it was a Harry Styles poem.
I think that's extremely exciting. I mean, I find it really fun. I think it's a really interesting way of organizing the world into categories. You know, those things that are related to Harry Styles and those things that aren't. And it turns out through the sort of might of your fandom, there's very little that's not connected to Harry Styles, which is kind of fun. But it is in 4 sections, and there are other kinds of influences at work here, maybe more obviously than Harry Styles. Can you tell us a little bit about that, about maybe the sections and the other influences, such as the TV show or TV shows in different languages, as the case is?
So the sections came quite late. It was quite a late decision. I think Jess had definitely mentioned it to me very early, but I couldn't really land on how they should be sectioned, and I wasn't really sure how they interacted with each other. But I'm actually very pleased with fandom, fangirl, fanfic and fan mail. In the end, I think it really ties it together, and it kind of gives each of those sections space to do what you're saying, like those exact things. So fandom is very much kind of the initial introduction to Harry in the world of concerts. A fangirl is kind of what I call like my Harry Styles poems with like 6 degrees of separation. Fanfic is based on the Norwegian, very niche, again, TV drama series Scam, which translates to shame, that similar to Harry kind of, started as this one kind of niche thing and then has been remade all across Europe. There's like Scam Italia, Spain, the German one featured his song, so I felt kind of justified in putting these poems in there too. And obviously fanfic speaks to the kind of incredible consumption of manufacture that fans have now, of which this, I guess, is a product, because as a fan I have manufactured these poems. And then fan mail is actually based on a newsletter series written by Alison Gross, which was, the full titles are in the notes, but it was a kind of think piece series that started as One Direction and kind of developed as the boys went solo. And it was really a real introduction into what I understood kind of fandom to be. And Ali's a PhD student and intelligent, very like incredibly charismatic as well person. So I really wanted to see like how these poems could go beyond like the kind of stereotypical hysteria of like girls screaming in a concert, which isn't true of fandom experiences anymore.
Can I ask you maybe a question about fan fiction? Because I find it, I find it extremely interesting, and I've read a lot more fan fiction than I'd really be proud to admit. Especially, I found this incredible cache on what I like to think of as the old internet, which means somewhere around 2000 and the early 2000s, when the internet was largely personal web pages with like a guest book and a visitor counter and a bit where you could, and like, the pets of the person who owned the website. It was this, but it was specifically made up of Titanic fan fiction, which, it's incredible to me because it seems like it comes from a similar kind of impulse. That's what I want to ask you, I suppose. But I mean, I was reading all kinds of things. I just sort of stopped reading them. I read one where Ross and Rachel from Friends were reunited, but on the Titanic, moments before, the inevitable happened. It was utterly, fascinating kind of stuff. But it seems to come from a place of like narrative dissatisfaction or something like that. But I guess you have fan fiction in that you're dealing with a real person. And I think what you do here is very ethical. And you mentioned that you're not, you don't mention Harry by name because it's not maybe exactly, or, you suspect it's not Harry you're working with. But I suppose, do you have any kind of relationship with fan fiction, or to what extent do you see this as fan fiction?
I think fan fiction itself is a really interesting thing. I think personally, I don't like it if it's real people. I think that kind of crosses the line. I think, with Harry, he should be able to live his private life privately. And I think I'm very much right about his public persona. But I think also fan fiction does have a lot of similarities to poetry in that it's kind of thankless. Like, people write these, 100,000 word novels basically online for free for people to read. And I'm sure they have lots of like critiques and comments. And as you know, the poetry field, is quite niche, and sometimes it does make you really question like who your audience is. I don't think like it's a bit of a leap to say that most people that read poetry are poets. I think obviously poetry does transcend those borders, but I think fan fiction has kind of similarities in the same way that you have to kind of know how to find these databases and these kind of like online communities to be able to access it. And the people that write it, I think, are very selfless a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to remember, isn't it? Well, let me ask you, maybe I'll ask you one other question. And I mean, I would love to hear another couple of poems if you feel like you would share some. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's a very general question, but this isn't necessarily a book for, it's not for anyone. This is a book that is for anyone to read. It's a book about, how we are living at the minute, I think, and how we understand each other, how we understand images. I mean, is there anyone you think would be, did you ever think of an ideal reader? Like, is there anyone that really would get this? Because I don't think Harry Styles would be the ideal reader of this.
I think Harry likes poetry, so I think he would appreciate this book, but I don't know whether he'd be the ideal reader, no. I think there are kind of two answers to this question. One is somebody who knows Harry's work and would be able to pick up on, like, the Met Gala earring, or maybe certain tour dates that might be specifically referencing and things like that. I think they would find it quite like a rewarding read. It's kind of a bit like a treasure hunt, I suppose, in that way. And I think on the other hand, the ideal reader is someone that doesn't know who Harry is, but is maybe open to like listening to his music, or wants to kind of explore maybe like the nostalgic relationship that comes with kind of like youth and celebrity, and kind of having that freedom to go to concerts and, not having the consequences, maybe like take a day off work, maybe you don't officially take that day off work, you call in sick and, end up on the concert floor, like screaming and singing along and everything. So really, I think my ideal reader is someone who is open to all of these things of like looking back on kind of like youth and music and celebrity. And then also someone who knows Harry's work would find it pretty rewarding too.
Thank you. And just one final thing that I thought, I find this so interesting. I'm sure everybody else would too, because I'd never thought of it really in these terms, that when we spoke in some time recently, we talked about, or you talked about rather, how, those people who were, let's say, obsessed with, let's say, One Direction, as 15-year-olds or 16-year-olds, those are now the people that are kind of running the world, which I think is really interesting. And that doesn't go away. I mean, those things are still inside those people who are doctors and lawyers and, who are, kind of ruling the world to some extent, or ruling's a big word, helping things move along.
Yeah, I really wanted to kind of reclaim the word fangirl in this book. I think for a long time it was kind of brushed aside as, teenage girls just screaming. But the reality is now that those people are, like doctors and lawyers and scientists and PhD students and, are people that are making change in the world. And I don't think it's fair to kind of undermine joy in that way. I think the world is hard enough as it is. You might as well spend some time doing the things that you like enjoy doing and having adventures and all that stuff if you have that option to do so. So I really did want to kind of reclaim the kind of fangirl hysteria in this book.
I think you've done that.
So actually these next poems are from the second section in the book, Fangirl. And this first poem is actually set in Jordan. I was on a cultural exchange visit with the University of Petra there last year. And it was a really incredible experience, my first time in the Middle East. And I was wearing a Harry Styles t-shirt on a campus tour. And one of our cultural partners pointed it out and said that she really liked his music too. And it was a really transformative moment in the trip. And we spent the rest of the tour kind of like talking about his music. And this poem is set at the night market in Jordan there. And it's called Cinnamon, Honey, Butter. Popcorn spits and oil sputters from the open pan onto the stairwell and into the hands of a boy who, eyebrow high and jaw slack, laughs and throws it, catching it tightly between his teeth. Not seasoned with the cinnamon, honey, butter, but salted, it melts by the warmth of his tongue. Ahead, the beekeepers are making a commotion. Glass shards have fallen between the cobblestones. A grandmother curses her husband's unreliable hands. Locals begin tallying pathways in the sky. The boy turns and translates for the tourists. The stars are out and so are the bees. Run. Flicking through the pages. This next poem actually features this exact jumper that I'm wearing. It's my favourite one, so I thought I'd wear it for good luck. part of the kind of joy that I found in kind of being part of this Harry Styles community is exploring the resale market and, you know, getting really good on eBay, kind of like bidding at the last minute and Depop. And I had a t-shirt imported from Japan a few weeks ago. There was an absolute bargain. It was like £15 from the final show in 2017. So I kind of really enjoyed collecting the kind of unusual things that would be slightly harder to find. And since I moved to Belfast, it's very cold, so I needed a lot of jumpers, and he does one in practically every colour. So I collected quite a few in the end. And this poem is called Outbid. I understand the market of pop star merchandise beautifully. I completed my jumper collection with an import, a North American tour exclusive in bright washout yellow. The seller would not post internationally, but I have memorized my American housemate's American address for this reason. On the resale market, I find the things most undervalued. A very early Live at the Troubadour t-shirt from May 2017. The seller is a cousin of the drummer, so couldn't appreciate it was the singer's first show with Stevie Nicks. Couldn't know the crowd cried as they performed Leather and Lace in public. This next poem was actually a commission for the National Trust last year. For the 50th anniversary of a Pop for Peace concert up at Minaban. And it's called Give Pop Music, Give Peace a Chance. A grandmother stands in the Terrace Hill garden as the foliage shifts and trembles in the wind. Her grandchildren explore as fungi rise and retreat along the beech tree bark on the woodland floor. Her dog vaults itself over a stroll of bluebells, and the grandmother is happy in the sunken garden, watching each contour, sketching the valley, searching her sprawling city for home. The young ranger runs to help collect the grass cuttings and the fallen plums, points and shouts at the small copper butterfly landing on the short blade scythe. Look, a gorgeous thing. The grandmother, knowing this place is a gorgeous thing, remembers perpetual rain clouds, pop music, potential, marmalade, deep joy, a telegram from John and Yoko, the thrill of running coloured chalk through the ends of her hair. She remembers sticking her thumb pad against the pin back of a badge that served as her first concert ticket. She traces the loop and swirl of her fingertip, finds ink smudges from felt tip pens and placards for peace. There are signs of the seasons turning. Nothing small or insignificant is rooted here. These next poems are from the third section in the book, fanfic. Woozy. The boy who was drunk on the late night and woozy from the neon face paint caught the eye of the boy who had a butterfly tattoo. The boys didn't spend a second thought for the waiting taxi. The boys cycled through the city, sprawled on a single bike. The boys were young and foolish and very much alive. And finally, in this little reading section, this is one of my favourite poems. I find it quite hard to read because there's no punctuation and long lines, which is actually my favourite form, but has been a challenge to learn how to read, accurately. And I wrote this poem after I went to watch a friend play water polo for the first time. Very interesting sport. I didn't know much about it, but would recommend it to all. And this poem is called Swimming Pool. The boy who could have been great at water polo with his long arms and excellent eyesight underwater, despite the hot chlorine air making his head swim, had been in bed with blankets pulled up to his ears long enough that the shadow around him worried enough that as he soothed the boy who was still breathing slowly, he was soft and gentle and lit quiet candles. Until both boys remembered the hurt, the worry, the nausea, the fear, that everything overwhelming would ease eventually, and the swimming pool was heated throughout the year. Thank you.
There's so many of those marvelous little flourishes at the end of poems that I really like. Those two, I think, are the ones that I think of. Yeah, the boys were young and foolish and very much alive. It's a great way to end things, isn't it? And even the poem next to that. And it was possible things had changed between them. Just some really marvelous finishes to poems that and starts, of course, but there's something special about where something ends.
I think these poems, I had kind of thinking about, like editing and things like that. I found these kind of the hardest to edit, and I wasn't really sure initially of their role in the book. I thought, does it fit? Is it thematically relevant? But I think the more I worked on them, the more I kind of got into writing sequences and thinking about the relationship between, the pages of poems themselves, I ended up really enjoying it, and the section has become one of my favourites.
The poems, not just in this section, of course, but generally throughout, they roam. There are a lot of exotic places in them, such as New York, such as Japan, such as Portadown, which I don't know, I haven't been there in a little while, but one of these days, we all long to get back. Are these poems like existing in a kind of, what is the relationship of the real world to these? I know some of them are intimately connected, like the poem you read, the Commission. That's absolutely with place in mind. Give pop a chance, give peace a chance. That absolutely is related to place. And we've talked a little bit about the idea of the internet. I guess I always think about this, which I find really interesting, that, the internet used to be a place. The internet used to have prepositions attached to it. You used to go on to the internet, you used to be online, etc. And you're not really anymore. You always kind of are. And I'm kind of interested that, that the internet used to be a place and it doesn't seem to be anymore. But generally speaking, like, where do these poems, what's their relationship with place? Does that matter to them? Are they, is their kingdom fandom is a phrase I've just turned?
I think place is important to these poems. I kind of, in some ways, wanted to replicate the feeling of being on a world tour. I know lots of people will go like night after night to show after show, all across Europe, and then they'll get on a plane and jump over to America or Australia and do the same thing there. So I kind of wanted to speak to that experience a bit, and I think I was very lucky to travel a lot last year. So I really wanted to kind of infuse some of these poems with that. And I do think generally, as much as these details can be like quite lyrical, I think if you ground them in a place, it really helps to like ground the reader and let them know that these things do actually exist. And I think, if you try to explain to someone what the internet actually is, I feel like I still don't even know what the internet is. It's just there all the time, and it seems more and more that we're looking for an escape from that. So I kind of wanted to balance the environment of being surrounded by, like social media, and anytime you do go to a place, you take a picture and post it online. But kind of the other side of that is people are starting to kind of turn against that, and I guess like switch off their phones. So if they're at the beach, they're really at the beach and there's nothing else distracting them. So I wanted these poems to feel a bit like a road trip and to feel like a world tour, but to like kind of enjoy the places that they're into. I think the poem at the Palm House in Botanic Gardens, as well as kind of Incanhelabor on page 31.
It's one that I like a lot because it has a digital detox day at the start of it, right?
Yeah, and that was actually a real thing from the graduate school. And this guy in my head is like colloquially known as Plant Tattoo Guy, and he doesn't know this poem exists in the world, but I find that really funny too. I kind of wanted to have these places that I like know very well, like the Palm House, and places that I really like aspire to go and visit, like Japan.
And can I ask too, one of the poems you read there, you mentioned was a commission, and I think it's particularly impressive that poems arising from all kinds of different circumstances and occasions still find themselves, in each other's company. There still is a place for them. I wonder if you would maybe just tell us, a little bit about what that commission is, because it's remembering a concert that took place, 50 years ago? Is that right?
Yeah, it was 50 years ago last year.
It does seem to speak to the significance of pop music, both today and, in the past.
Yeah, I think, this one, I think, this commission and this poem, I suppose, feel like they were perfectly suited because I was very much enjoying writing about music at the time that this came up. So when I kind of wrote like a letter of, kind of like put myself forward for it, I felt like I had the right things to say, and I was interested in what this one event did for bringing peace to an area and kind of bringing like conversations and different narratives to the same place. And I think kind of at the end as well, everyone kind of like picks up their trash bag and, you know, they put away all the litter, and the kind of post-concert feeling is a really strange sense of euphoria. You have all this adrenaline that happens and all this dehydration and everything. And then when it finishes, you know, you often see people that are like crying or like really emotional and beside themselves. And I think it's but then there's also a sense of community that comes from that as well. Like you'll see people like, you know, checking that everyone's okay and wanting to make sure that everyone has had a good time. So I think like kind of pop music and concerts are a very strange experience and a very specific experience, but one that is universal to all of us. If we've been to a concert, we would recognize that. So I was thrilled to write this one for the National Trust, and I think it also kind of gave me the validation when I was looking at this book too, that these poems say something more than just like, oh, I liked Harry Styles' debut album. They kind of interact with the world and kind of like stake their claim there. So I was thrilled to write this one.
And one of the things that, you know, I find especially interesting about it, and I think we've talked about this a little bit before, is, you know, the idea of who Harry is pretty clear, or you know, this outwardness is pretty clear. But these aren't like really the kind of lyric. I mean, I mentioned John Montague at the start, because what he said was interesting and useful, I think. But, you know, the sort of poems that he has written and, you know, his relationship with place, for example, don't seem necessarily to come from the same place here, broadly speaking. And I guess I wonder, you know, the I who is saying these poems, it's not really you, is my feeling. You know, it's you know, it's not quite this, what we understand by the, you know, this sort of lyric poem. It's someone. Is it you? That's what I'm asking. I can't decide. Sometimes it feels like it is. Sometimes it feels like it can't be.
I think that's probably the right answer, is that sometimes it is and that sometimes it feels like it's not me. I think, you know, when I kind of had finished editing this and then I was working on some like kind of sign language poems in which I'm very much involved and very much there, I found it really difficult because for the last 3 years I had been kind of writing through this prism, and I never really had admitted that any of the I's might be me, or, you know, like any of the U's in any of the poems, like, you know, were versions of me. So I had to kind of confront that a bit when I moved on to newer works. But I do think I very much like writing through prisms, and I like reading through prisms as well. Like I don't want to know the full biography of an author before I read a book, but if there is kind of a specific detail that I think adds to the book and makes you kind of appreciate it more, then that is something I would want to know. I think if I wasn't a Harry Styles fan, this book would be very different now, and I'm not sure that as a reader I would read it in the same way. So knowing that I have this kind of like appreciation and I guess expertise as well at the end of the day, like I learned a lot about Harry over the last few years, I think really adds to the collection, to his poems.
And can I ask you just another question, sort of something you mentioned just now? I mean, I know this, we can't pretend that we don't talk about this very often, but I mean, one of the things that you spend a lot of your time doing is working on translation. And I mean, it's, you know, endlessly fascinating that, you know, you work, you know, from a language, you know, from British Sign Language that is, you know, is involved in a whole different set of signs. And, you know, this is a book that, you know, brings from celebrity, brings from film, from TV show, into English, into poems, and you spend a lot of time, you know, translating in other ways. I mean, is translation involved in this? Is this one of the things that you could be said to be doing? And, you know, one of the poems you read there has translation at the end of it. The boy turns and translates for the tourists. The stars are out and so are the bees. Run. I mean, is translation part of this? Is the same part of your imagination active, or is that just a kind of lazy analogy I'm using? And it's not really that.
I suppose with sign language, like I am very much preoccupied with visuals and aesthetics, and I guess having also like a real love of music and sound, but also being aware of kind of the silence of sign language, I guess. Has that kind of tension that I am always conscious that I want to explore and kind of see what happens. I think you could regard some of this as translation, and obviously Ekphrasis is kind of involved here too. And I think it's kind of looking at, there was so much kind of source material that I had to work with at the end of the day, that maybe looking at a particular concert and seeing if there was like a tiny minute detail that I might want to like draw out and reference, that I guess I would regard as a translation of sorts, to kind of not necessarily a dilution, but to really like notice the differences in the details. And I absolutely love translation. I think it's, such a creative process. And I do really want to develop those skills more as well, over the next few years. So I think it's inherently part of me as a writer. I read a lot in translation, and I hope to write more in translation as well.
Yeah, we'll all be looking forward to it. I've got one more question that I want to ask you now, and maybe you would read us a handful more poems if that's all right. And I would like to, remind and encourage everyone that we would love to have some questions from you if you have them. I have a few from some people who sent some questions ahead, so I have them that I will ask if we haven't touched on them already. But the chat function is there, and I think there are no more hooligans left, which seems safest for all of us. So it would be wonderful if you had some thoughts, some questions, if you would put them there, and I will very happily put them to Bebe. But I couldn't resist a kind of bittersweet kind of question. This is a really lovely launch. I miss concerts a lot. I think the first concert I saw was, actually I know what it was, but I can't tell you. Well, it was the rock group Audio Slave. They were really, they were big for a while. Like people, they were okay. But I saw them in Dublin, I think, and it was great. And I remember that first feeling, of like a bass instrument kind of making your diaphragm go funny. Just hearing things at that volume. And we might not have been at a concert together, but we might have been in a bookshop together. We might have been hanging out together. What would this launch have been like? What would the ideal one be? If we could be doing it together.
I was actually meant to be in New York right now because Harry Styles had organised like a fancy dress party with Orville Peck for Halloween, super cleverly named Harryween. And I was planning on kind of like waving the book in the air to kind of grab all the positive energy for, this publication year. And instead that's been pushed back a year. So I'm aiming for like a 1-year anniversary Halloween show instead. But yeah, I was very much kind of looking forward to No Alibis, and I wanted to hire out Cafe O to put on the record player. But I think, we can all kind of recreate that at home, have a hot drink. I think there's something really special that comes with music in like a really intimate setting. So I'm a big fan of listening to music with headphones on, or like a record player and blasting it. So I think either of those options, and then you can kind of, and if you can't read and listen to music at the same time, maybe listen to a few songs, then read a few poems, listen to another few songs, read a few more poems, and then just have like a big dance party at the end.
That sounds like wonderful advice.
Yes.
Well, would you read us a few more poems? And in the meantime, I think questions are being formulated, and I'm certain they're going to arrive after these few poems.
Yes. So before I just read the final few poems, I just want to say a few quick thank yous. I definitely won't remember everyone I want to thank, so please read the acknowledgements if you think it might be you. It probably is. You're probably in here. But absolutely massive thank you to everyone at Banshee. This whole process has been so enjoyable, but so educational as well. I feel like I've learned so much about how to navigate the world of publishing, but also me as a writer. To Jessica Traynor as well, thank you so much for helping me edit these poems. To Stephen, thank you for doing this. I've really enjoyed our conversation so far. And yeah, everyone who think you might be thanked, you probably are, so please read it. And if you're not, then you probably are anyway, it's just not in the book. And the final few poems I'm going to read from the section fan mail from the, so actually all these poems are collaged from various newsletters. I think there were maybe about 24 newsletters in the end, and they were 1,000-word long think pieces, so quite a lot of material to work with. But these poems are very much grateful to Ali for that initial writing. So I'll just read through a couple of them now. Ali, I subscribe to a newsletter from somebody who writes better than I do on boy bands, on bodies, on catching up and acting your age, on housekeeping and closure, on fine line, on uncomplicated boys, on getting it in profile. Look, this is how it really feels. Excuse me, sorry, hi. We took a photograph, no distance between the two of us, a tangled moment I could not stop from rupturing out of body, magnified through the window of a small cafe in North London. I remember fragments, the shallow questions that people ask a collective popular object. Within 5 minutes, I knew I loved the stranger in my head. Like the washing machine on spin cycle, I am blonde and drunk dancing in the dark to nice boys with acoustic guitars. I intended to be on my own, but it's fun to put on a good show of awkward hip thrusts and hurt feet. There is something that reminds me of the best photo from a cheap camera. The hue of sweetness and ease extends to the endearing flat at the edge of town, to the beautiful, sexy pirate prince who spins, soft-edged and boyish, in a white t-shirt. Ghost. He dances to layered vocals, navigates the cool guy criticism in private conversations and parlor games. He translates adjectives into chord progressions, and to feel good, he describes the sunflowers in the kitchen, signs of swagger and joy. He is afraid of the uproar, but is lucky enough to be beautiful. This next poem I wrote a really long time ago. It's a very short poem, but has been picked up a lot with people that have kind of the advanced copies, and I think really speaks to our time. So it's really interesting seeing this poem in the context of the book being published when the world is so different, and obviously I couldn't have predicted the pandemic. But yeah, this poem has really stood out to me over the last few weeks or so. In a time when joy feels like an endangered resource, things are very simple. Protect each other. Profile. In the end, it is impossible to forget the beauty of abandoned pop stars. There is a sense they withstood the first few punches in the media landscape and stitched together the things they loved with trademark enthusiasm. Do not fear their dulcimers and sparkly oven stickers, their mushroom lunches, their behind-the-scene meditations. Let them discover drunken karaoke. Let them defend the quiet hour of time they can ride around Malibu in a Tesla. And before I read this final poem, also thank you all for being here today. I hope you have enjoyed listening to some of these poems and getting a bit more insight into them. And I'm happy to answer any further questions if you were to bump into me at any point in the future. Harry, you found something peculiar being anonymous in Japan, even with the katakana of your name embroidered onto soft hoodie fabric. You let the Shiba Inu lick the residential plants hiding from the residential air conditioning unit. You jogged the yellow-tiled steps in yellow striped socks. You pushed aside the painful stage of growing out curls with gravity in a place that seemed to stretch sideways in all seasons. Of all the moonstruck moments, this is the one I'd most like to meet. So that's Gold Light Shining by me, available now.
Gold Light Shining by Bebe, please buy it. There are lots of links in the chat. I do have a couple of further questions from, I'm glad the praise is coming in. I've got a couple of further questions. I'm gonna put the first one to you just because of what may be a coincidence of a name. I think some of this might have been, we might have touched on this a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure. One Lottie Ashley says, this collection, and again we have touched on this, but I think there's some elements we haven't. This collection has been described as a Harry Styles collection, but a lot of it stems from other inspiration or material. How did you decide what themes fit together?
I think, well, firstly, thank you, Lottie. That question is quite challenging. That's my sister. I think kind of as I was first writing, I didn't really want to rule anything out. I'm very much kind of feel like I don't really edit until quite late as well, because I'm not sure what I'm going to want to keep and what's going to have like a new or interesting relationship with something else I haven't written yet. So I was very much kind of writing quite broadly when I started and pulling everything together. It was really in the final few stages when one of the biggest questions I think was with the fanfic section, how do I feel about that and how does it relate to the other poems? But I think also there are so many references to other literary works in this book that people wouldn't necessarily realise as well. So Sweet Creature references Othello Act 3, Scene 3. Pretty Woman is actually created using the script for the rom-com. So I kind of wasn't too worried in the end about does this like fit entirely into a box, because I don't think any of the poems should do, and I kind of enjoy all the tangents that exist out in the world.
Thanks, Bebe. We do have a question from the live audience that I would love to put to you. Lucy Home Roberts, I think, says, "Hi, Bebe, gorgeous poems. Thank you."
Thank you.
I agree, Lucy. Were you ever a super fan of anyone when you were younger? And if so, do you feel like you ever got to know them in the same way as you have through this process?
That's a really interesting question. I don't think there has been anything that definitely not that I've known in the same way. I think kind of writing about Harry and kind of doing all this research, because really all these, you know, like trips to concerts and stuff became research development opportunities, and even, you know, going to the Met and things like that, it was very much research orientated that just happened to be super fun for me. So I don't think there is anything that I feel like I know as much about when I was younger. And I don't know also that I could write another book like this with someone else. I think it very much was a coincidence of kind of right place at right time. And I was looking for like new hobbies, and I just moved to Belfast. So I was looking for kind of, you know, new things to keep me occupied. And it just so happened that Harry became that for the last few years.
Yeah, it's very interesting that as you described, I mean, that your kind of relationship with Harry Styles kind of developed alongside the poems. You know, you said that you weren't necessarily a fan of him. You just happened to be. I know that kind of feeling of being mildly delirious and things having that extra special edge to them. And you sort of write, and as you kept writing, you kept learning more, and then writing along with it. It's interesting that these two things happened kind of in parallel or concurrently.
I never felt any pressure to write any Harry Styles poems. Like I knew if I didn't want to write about Harry Styles anymore, I just wouldn't do it. But it was just something that I enjoyed working on so much, and I enjoyed finding new ways to keep that fresh. So what started as like kind of using the track listing, kind of ended up using kind of like an underground email newsletter series that reality nobody else would know of and find. So yeah, I kind of enjoyed thinking about how far I could take one source of, I guess, like, you know, muse, or one source of inspiration, and seeing how far I could break that down and how far it would take me.
Thanks, Bebe. And a question here from Kira Gorman. What a beautiful evening this has been. Thanks for being here, Kira. She says, "I'm completely fascinated by the influence of fashion on your work. Can you talk a little more about the patchwork of fashion influences or fashion references in these poems, or how the Met Gala influenced you, or whether you have a favorite Harry outfit that inspired you, perhaps?"
I do have a favourite Harry outfit. It's the Harris Reed Amsterdam 2017 look that I kind of colloquially call like Pirate Prince look. It's very good, lots of flares. My biggest regret in life actually is that I've never seen Harry Styles in a Gucci floral suit, and I'm hoping that he will like bring that back in future tours so that I can experience one live. It's interesting to me because I don't feel like I'm not super fashionable. I love like jumpers and hoodies and jeans. And all of that kind of thing. So I think when I was looking for inspiration, or when I look at Harry, I think it's like the attention to detail that is there that is so interesting to me. And I think he very much does whatever he wants to do. And I think there's a confidence in that is very motivating. Like nobody else was wearing like two-piece floral suits a few years ago and like high-waisted flares. They might not look as good on anyone else as they do on him, but you know, he just does whatever he wants to do. And I guess kind of when I look at the fashion and stuff, I've definitely learned a lot, and the Harry Styles Fashion Archive, which is also acknowledged in here, was a huge help. They find everything super quick, and it's fun to kind of be able to look back and think about the textures and the colours. And I think I kind of ended up using those kind of things for like aesthetics and mood and ambiance. So if I was looking for a certain mood, I might try and like find an outfit that I think kind of sets that, and use that kind of as like background detail for the poems. And thank you for being here, Kira.
Clodagh has a question too that I think is a really great one. Clodagh says, "I think the book's cover art," she doesn't say it like that, that's how I said it. "I think the book's cover art is so striking. How did you land on the final design?"
Oh yeah, so thank you to Anna Morrison for designing this. Yes. So I actually have next to me, because I had some props just in case I needed anything. This is the cover of Fine Line, Harry Styles' second album. been out for like just coming up to a year now, and you might notice like a similarity in the trousers. So I think that was a really fun thing for me. Like I really enjoy like the flares and kind of just, I feel like it's a very identifiable silhouette, but the bee earring as well in particular at the bottom here, for when he hosted the Met Gala, Camp Notes on Fashion, he wore like a single bee pearl honey drop earring, which is also features in a poem in this book too. So it was kind of fun to be able to like reference those things that as a fan, I would say like are quite iconic Harry Styles moments, but that you can get away with in any shop window to make it look memorable and hopefully convince people to take a look at it.
I'm going to ask maybe two questions in one. So a similar question from our friends Jake Hockey and from Micheál McCann. They both ask sort of pretty much the same question in slightly different ways. But Jake says, if Harry was to pick up your work, what would be your ideal reaction from him? Something philosophical, an expression of pure joy, or would you expect something in between?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't really spent much time thinking about what Harry would think because I just find that very overwhelming. I think he is like quite a literary guy. Like he has references in like Woman to Charles Bukowski. He's read Rumi and Watermelon Sugar, references in Watermelon Sugar as well. So I think I would just want him to kind of appreciate it for what it was, that it was something fun and joyful. And I think also like this book has brought me so many opportunities, and I think he would be able to recognize that in the same way that his music and his kind of, you know, X Factor career has completely transformed his life. And this has kind of completely transformed my life. Like now I have a book, I'm a published author. So I think we would kind of share that feeling.
I think so. Cara Bailey has a question I think you'll like. Cara says, hi, Bebe, huge congratulations for a beautiful collection and arriving at this evening. I'm curious to know, how does Harry Styles translate into BSL? Are there any specific signs that are identified with him?
So anyone who's in my sign language classes, whenever we have kind of like presentations or we're practicing, like maybe 5 times out of 10, I'd be like, oh, the singer Harry Styles. So kind of by the end of 12 weeks or the end of the course, everybody would know that that's what I'm going to sign anyway. So it's kind of cheating on fingerspelling exams too, because they know what to expect. He hasn't got a specific sign in the kind of sign language community that I'm in. It would just be like fingerspelling his name. But I think I will have to give him a sign name now. That's not something I've thought of. And actually I would love to write a poem about that. So thank you, Cara. That will be next week's poem.
And maybe one other question from the recent past, from Maeve McKenna, who asks about the title. How did you come up with the title of the collection, Gold Light Shining?
I actually found the title really, really hard. Like, I think like there were several emails that I sent to Banshee and I couldn't really land on anything. Gold Light Shining was the original title. Well, okay, no, it wasn't. The original title was something like Boy with the Pearl Earring. But for a while, Gold Light Shining was the kind of solid title. And then I got talked out of it. So I tried to think up like so many more things. And none of them were quite right. But I actually found this. So I decided to like sit down with all of my Harry Styles like kind of editorial magazines, have like Rolling Stone, Another Man, beauty papers, things like that. And I just kind of like flicked through the articles. I was looking to see if anything jumped out at me. And I think Gold Light Shining was from Rolling Stone of last year, kind of September issue, I think. And yeah, I just thought it really spoke to how much fun I had writing this, and yeah, and just kind of, it just seemed to fit really well. And I think that's probably why I couldn't come up with another title when I discarded it, because I felt like that was the one I really wanted to use anyway.
It's a marvelous title. I think it communicates what is happening, I think, throughout this, and yeah, that light that's animating everything. Claudia has a question here that, yeah, we don't know. Do you think Harry will have an influence on your next collection?
I actually don't think I've written about Harry in a while. I don't know how true that is, to be honest. I mean, he's probably there somewhere, but I think I will always write about pop culture. Like, I'm very interested in music and pop culture. So I think those references will be there. At the minute, he's like not on tour or anything, and this year I had planned to go to like a lot of concerts and shows, so I think maybe that's why I haven't ended up writing anything. I don't know that I could do another whole book of them, but I do think I'll probably end up referencing him somewhere, especially if he wins a Grammy next year, I think. So yes, but you might not know it's a Harry Styles poem.
It's inescapable, isn't it? Well, I think it's everyone's collective responsibility here, rather than to necessarily get you, Bebe, to Harry. I think we have to cause enough of a fuss that Harry comes to you, which I think there's some pretty sure ways of doing that. So I'm sure everyone will be as inclined as they can be to tell everyone they know how excited they are by the book, and to get his attention the old-fashioned way, by word of mouth. I think we might be out of questions. We have a comment that, of course, you can read yourself, but Lisa Ashley says, fantastic debut collection, Bebe, very proud parents. I suppose you'll know what that means. It's been a joy to talk to you. It's a thrill always to talk about this, and we'd be doing it anyway. It's lovely to do it in the company of other people. I might invite Laura maybe to come back, well, I guess all I can say again is congratulations. What a lovely evening. Thank you for talking so candidly and warmly and openly. Thank you for reading the poems.
Thank you for your questions. They're very insightful, and I hope everyone enjoys reading them. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bebe and Stephen, for that wonderful conversation. I also want to say thanks to James for all his help this evening, and the Arts Council of Ireland for their continued support. Gold Light Shining is available on our website and in all good Irish bookshops. The link is in the chat, and it's free shipping for all launch attendees. The offer code is BB. Sincere apologies for those interruptions at the start, and thank you so much to Stephen and Bebe for moving on so expertly from them. Most of all, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you all, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your night. Thanks so much.